Back to the Rusty
Now go.
Welcome back to the Rusty Pipes Fantasy Football League. I'm your host Michael Moore, and we're bringing back predictions this week for just in time for the start of the fantasy playoffs. Now we got some big matchups this week, especially with a lot of these top teams possibly on the brink of a first round upset. Starting off, we'll have one of the hottest teams in the league, Parlay Melee, owned by Reach, went on a nice hot streak, win streak to end the year, got back into the playoffs as a 6 seed, and will take on what used to be one of the best teams in the league, and Mixon Aaron's Ayahuasca, owned by Josh. He's kind of went on a little bit of a cold streak. He didn't drop a lot of games, but he wasn't putting up the points like he was. So this will make it a great matchup. As you can tell by the predictions here, it's a very tight margin. Reed is slightly an underdog, but we'll see the benefit of the doubt. So, starting off, we have Josh Allen going against Jared Goff. Now, Goff has been struggling lately, and that Detroit offense hasn't been clicking like it was earlier in the year. Now, he's going against a very tough Denver defense on Saturday night primetime. So we'll see how Goff can do, and if he can pull it together for this big matchup for Josh. Meanwhile, we got Josh Allen going against another tough defense in Dallas. Now, Allen has proved he can perform against these defenses, and he is in line again to keep his hot streak running, and he is a key factor in Regis' win percentage. Now going down, we have a Tony Pollard who's had a big bit of a resurgence lately, not putting up the points that he was last year, but he can still perform. Other big names are Deebo Samuel going against an easy matchup in the Arizona Cardinals. DK Metcalf, while Philly's offense is good, their secondary is struggling this year. Big part of why he will have a big game Monday night. Finally, we have Sam Laporta. Now, like I said about Goff, with Goff struggling, Laporta hasn't been doing as well as he has, but he's still putting up good numbers. If we go into the game log, these last few weeks, he had 17 and 29 2 and 3 weeks ago, but he put up a measly 4.5 points against Chicago last week. Now we'll see if he can bounce back with Goff, but like I said, Denver, tough team. Now going over to Josh's, we have Tyreek Hill, who had a bit of a scary injury last week in a tough loss to the Tennessee Titans, but he's back. He's hopefully healthy because Josh will need him. He is going against the Jets, and while I did have a big game against them earlier in the year, it's still Sauce Gardner who just shut down the Houston Texans. Other notable names, we have A.J. Brown. And like I said, Philly offense is still doing good, and so is A.J. Brown. We also have James Cook, who hasn't been doing as well with this Bills offense lately. He's been kind of in and out with Latavius Murray, and with that tough Dallas defense, we'll see how well he can perform. Ingram coming off a big week, but he gets a tougher matchup in Baltimore. And Cooper Kupp, Josh is still waiting for Kupp to kind of get his groove back. He did pop off when he first came back. You see those 19 and 27-point games, but lately it's been a struggle, except for last week. He finally hit that groove again in that tough Baltimore game. But we'll see if he can keep that consistency going. All around, it will be a tight matchup, but this is what I will say is one of the first of the upsets this week, when I have Reach taking down Josh in a tight affair with a final prediction of 137 to 135. Next up in the predictions, we have El Cabo, owned by Cobb, taking on Live Laugh Facebook, owned by Carson. Now, Carson did sneak into the playoffs with a 500 record of 7-7, which was 7th in the league, so he did at least beat out the 8th. He does get a tough matchup against El Cabo, 2nd in the league. Now, it is more of a lower scoring prediction than we had in the last one, but we do still have good players. Now, Cobb, while he does have Hurts, is in a little bit of a QB conundrum, as he does have Dak Prescott on the bench. And we're going to come up with a little more of a... Cobb is dealing with some start-sit decisions that other managers would not like to have. These being one of the first. Hurts, while a good player, he does have a good matchup against Seattle. But Dak right now is playing on an MVP level, and it's really hard if you were any other manager to sit him. Now, luckily, Hurts is also one of those top players, and he's putting up good numbers, especially a couple weeks ago against that Buffalo game where he scored 5 touchdowns, big game. I think that was like 43 points, something like that. Now, luckily for him, Jamar Chase still is doing really well this year, even with Joe Burrow going down with a surprise emergence of Jake Browning coming in for the injured Burrow. And he keeps feeding Chase, which is very good for his fantasy production. Michael Pittman is getting good production with Gardner Minshew, keep feeding them the ball. Kind of same with Chase, backup comes in, and he actually kind of boosts his production in that time. Now, some other key guys will have Austin Eckler. He was on the bench last week. He's back in the starting lineup and Cobb is really hoping he can find his old self again. You know, he's been struggling this year. There's questions about him getting up there in age. And as we all know, running backs, short lifespan. We'll see if he can perform when Cobb needs him most. He does have a better matchup than last week where he played against Denver. He has the Raiders this week, who did just hold the Vikings to 3 points, but still somehow lost because, then again, they are the Raiders. Biggest key factor, or 2 players for Cobb this week, are his tight end and flex. We have Dallas Goedert and Nico Collins. Now, Nico got hurt last week, so he only put up about 1 point. And Goedert, tough matchup against Dallas. You know that any player that goes against them is bound to have a bad game. Now, he's hoping that both of them can bounce back. Will be questions about Nico's health. You know, I don't know the severity total of the injury, but with those guys on question, coming 1 week off it, we'll never know. Over on the other side, we do have Carson, who has Tua starting against the Jets defense. Now, we just saw the Jets shut down that high-flying Texans offense. And Miami just blew a 27-13 lead this past week. There is question marks about Tua being able to handle those higher pressure situations, especially with Miami battling for the #1 seed. But we did see him have a great game against the Jets the last time they played on Black Friday. So we'll see if he can repeat that performance this week. We also have Diggs going against that Dallas defense. But luckily his brother is not covering him, so we'll see if he can burn DaRon Bland just like DK Metcalf did 2 weeks ago. Devontae Adams, we'll see if he can kind of find that groove. You know, Aiden O'Connell coming in, he kind of helped Adams' production just because Jimmy G, not a very good deep ball thrower, and that's where Adams, a lot of his points come from. So as we can see these last few weeks, he's had some good production, 14, 21, 12, 12. Now, while it's not that wide receiver top 8 that Adams once was, it's still better than what he was earlier in the year. But big factors this week will be Derrick Henry coming off a nice 2-touchdown performance against the Dolphins. Carson will need another big game out of him, and luckily he's going against Houston, which Henry historically dominates. We also have George Kittle coming off another big game. Brock Purdy loves giving him touchdowns, so we'll see if he can continue that performance this week against Arizona. Now, big storyline, Cobb very nervous about upsets. He's been questioning this 8-team playoff for a while now, but luckily for Cobb, I do predict him getting the win this week, staying alive in this playoff, going on to the semifinals, beating Carson with a score of 130-125. Next up is the other tight matchup that I predict this week, as we have the #1 team, Baby Back Gibbs, owned by Smiley, sitting at a league best 12-2, taking on the 6-8 8 seed Sierra's Cuck, owned by Russ. Now, biggest storyline coming in, or 2 big storylines. The smaller one being Russ coming in after selling off his team, and he sneaks in after winning the head-to-head against Drone Tree Trimmer, owned by the Silverback Gorilla himself, Jason Moore. Now, the big part of this is because the emergence of C.J. Stroud playing at a Rookie of the Year or even MVP level. Now, Stroud suffered last week, but also kind of getting hampered by an injury. So we'll see if he can bounce back against the Tennessee Titans team that this year has been great against the run, but bad against the pass. So that could benefit Stroud, even with an injury. We have Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jalen Waddle. Now, both had decent weeks last week, but Waddle, while he did perform with Tyreek out, he's still looking for that elusive touchdown to really elevate his performance even more. Big players this week for Russ will definitely be Zach Moss in that flex, who, while he was dominating earlier this year with Jonathan Taylor out of the lineup, he's been struggling as he comes back into that starting role, with Taylor being out for these next few weeks. We also have Devon Achane, the touchdown machine. While he isn't putting up the same yardage numbers that he was early in the year, he's still putting up the touchdowns. That's big for his performance, but he's going to need Russ will need Achane to put up more yardage to help boost that numbers. He did get helped by his receiving game last week, but we don't know if he can continue those numbers. Over on the other side of the ball, the biggest storyline is Justin Herbert being out for Baby Back Gibbs, and with both his starting QBs this year, Anthony Richardson and Herbert, being out for the year on the IR, Smiley was forced to pick up the great Joe Flacco, who has had 2 great performances for the Browns the last 2 weeks, including a 3-touchdown performance last week. Now, this will probably be the most key player in this week's playoffs, as this might hamper the #1 team. But he can be carried by greats like CMC, Mike Evans, and David Njoku, coming off a huge game last week. Now, He can only hope that he can repeat that performance with Joe Flacco throwing the ball. That'll be a key wide receiver tight end duo. Another big name is Brandon Ayuk, who him and Debo had great weeks last week, both going for over 100 yards and a touchdown. That'll be another key matchup. Easy Arizona defense. That whole 49ers offense should be cooking this week, but you never know. Purdy likes to either spread it around or focus on one player. But like I said, Flacco will be the biggest player this week. I'll need him to do good in my league for a playoff run, and Smiley will need the same. Luckily, he's going against Chicago, who has a weak defense, but as they just shut down the Lions last week, they can play tough, they can play scrappy, and that is why I have the second upset of this playoff with Russ sneaking in as the 8th seed, knocking off the number 1 team, and the key reason is that quarterback. We'll see if he can continue it, but I still have Russ pulling out the upset with a score of 128 to 124. Final matchup of this first week of fantasy playoffs, we have Schultz going up against Suck My Wake, owned by the great Durham Dink. Now, Richie has been on a bit of a Florida State run, as per se, as even with all of these injuries taking place, he lost Jefferson, he lost Kirk, I think he lost a third, I can't remember, Nick Chubb. Even with that, he still pulled through, made some trades, and is in the playoffs at a solid 9-5 record, good enough for the 5th seed. He is going up against Schultz, who, while only 10-4, is a dominant team. On Richie's side of the ball, he's got Brock Purdy, a great addition that he needed after Kirk went down, and he's been putting up big numbers lately. I know Russ hates it, but he is putting up those MVP numbers and is the lead for that. Other than that, he also has D-Hop, who benefits from big games from Will Levis, but the entire Titans offense is up and down, and we'll see if Levis can have back-to-back big weeks, and that will help out Richie, as he does need this against Schultz this week. Other than that, Drake London, another big week, coming off a 30-point game. He really needs Desmond Ridder to hit those throws. He's had some games where he has 8 targets but 2 catches. Richie can't have that. Other than that, another big name, Dalton Kincaid. Going against Dallas, they're really tough on everyone. So Kincaid can either end up with 5 catches, 50 yards, and a touchdown with a solid 16, or a goose egg. You never know. Other side of the ball, Schultz, Pat Mahomes. Now, Mahomes struggled mightily last week. Actually, he's been struggling a lot this season. But luckily for him, he's going up against a weak New England defense. Now, Bill Belichick did just hold a bunch of teams below 10 points, but they were mediocre at best, or just bad coaching in the case of the Chargers. Other than that, we have Chris Olave, who has been getting a better connection with Derek Carr late in the season, putting up good numbers, and he's going against Giants. We also have Jefferson. Came back last week, but got knocked out early with a chest injury. We'll see if he can come back, if healthy, and put up those numbers that Schultz needs.
He's playing.
We have confirmation. Well, I knew he was playing, but we'll see how much that chest injury hampers him. Other than that, we have Travis Etienne going against a tough Baltimore defense. I believe Etienne, he had hot middle of the season, but he's kind of cooled off lately. He's had back-to-back 17-point games, but before that, he only had a 6 and an 8, and now he's going against a tough Baltimore defense against the run. Other than that, we have Breece Hall. He's been up and down lately. I think the big problem is he's trying to look for too many home run, hitting the home run, but when he does, it hits. Other than that, we have Hawkinson going against the Cincinnati Bengals and DJ Moore. Key matchup here. DJ Moore, tough Cleveland defense. They aren't as dominant as they were earlier in the year. They've had some key injuries. They got exposed by even the Denver Broncos, but you never count them out, especially with Myles Garrett pressuring Justin Fields. That will be the big key matchup, but even with all these question marks, Schultz still pulls out a nice, clean win over Richie in the first round with a score of 131 to 120. That'll be it for the first week of the playoff predictions. Leave a like and enter what you think of mine in the comments. Thank you.